this because I'm not a teacher and I don't normally stand at podiums. I don't really know how to do that. So thanks for inviting me to China. It's my first trip here. I know it's very important to be here. It's very important for me to be here to support this movie, Billy Lynn. I have a few photos. I am including photos from directors I've worked with, Ang Lee, Martin Scorsese, and Jeunet, just to show what I do as a craftsman sitting on set, making 3D by hand with these directors. Most of my experience is live action, so using 2 cameras to capture 3D perspective, frame by frame throughout the movie. So we're here to talk about 120 4K 3D, and what I want to do is document this film in history as an important event. And China is really important to that situation. China has embraced technology. They're the world leaders in 3D, and I recognize that. And I thank China, and I'd like to thank the people who invited me here to the Beijing Film Academy to speak about 3D. And hopefully 3D has a still very, very healthy future in China. And I would like to see 3D also improve. And a lot of what we're doing on Billy Lynn is trying to give you the whole shebang, as Ang calls it, which we're trying to give you an experience with a laser projector, the brightest film you've ever seen. We're trying to give you detail on the big screen. But for me, as a 3D filmmaker, and for Ang, 120 became the ultimate solution. So even if you see it in 2K versus 4K, or even if you see it at 14-foot Lamberts versus 28-foot Lamberts, I think for me the solution is the 120 3D. And I think it might be easier next year for some people, if they really want to try 120, to even do 2K with a dual projection system for each eye. You see that these are f/65 Sony cameras for the 4K workflow. It's a big camera, and that is a compromise and a challenge for space when you're on set. This film was made as a proof of concept with a smaller budget and 47 planned shooting days, so it had to be very, very efficient. And our cinematographer, John Toll, who did Braveheart and Legends of the Fall, is a very experienced cameraman, insisted on testing various scenarios with this big 3D rig. Because it looks big, because the f/65 is big. So we have to be honest about logistics and planning, and do we need to cut cars in half? But we didn't do that. We succeeded in finding solutions and stripping things down and making a mobile system. A lot of my journey has been proving that 3D photography in the field is viable, efficient, and as fast as 2D. And to make a movie with Ang Lee in 47 shooting days, under $50 million, with a very good team of photographers and camera department, it proves a lot. And I'm glad that China is embracing the film and recognizing that with us. I want to go back and say, this Steadicam is dangerous, don't do that. It's too heavy. I want to go back and say, when Ang Lee was looking for somebody very special to say that this film was possible. And I have a partner who's an engineer, who's very tech savvy. His name is Ben Gervais. I think making Billy Lynn could have been impossible with a lot of very, very expensive bids and quotes. So I'd like to give credit to my engineering partner, Ben, who said, yes to Ang Lee, we can build everything you want with off-the-shelf computers and hard drives and build you a mobile lab. We can go to Atlanta, we can go to Morocco, we can show you 3D dailies on a screen instantaneously, and we can deliver something nobody else can. And so what we did is we just jumped in and said yes, and I think that's important. We've done some further testing, so I'll get to this, but the 120 experience is about gathering more information and data. And what you're making from 120 is different deliverables. So 24 is better if you shoot 120 and deliver 24, and 60 is better. And the reason is you can control the shutter in post-production. And the hard thing for us in 3D was strobing and judder at 24. So 120 is so smooth because you have all those frames, so nothing hurts, is it? So what you're doing by gathering more information, you're delivering all the way down the line a better movie for everybody, including 2D, 24, 60, 3D, because you're controlling the sequence of the frames and you're controlling the clarity versus the blur. So you're controlling a cinematic look versus a hyper-real look. And we call it hyper-realism, but really what Billy Lynn is just closer to being a realistic project. That's 55-inch monitors. You see we were using LG monitors for the 3D work. They're very fast and very easy. What I wanted to talk about is, somebody asked me what it's like working with Ang Lee. And Ang Lee has a very sort of nice, humble approach to working with his artisans. He told me, he said, Demetri, I don't want to talk about your film Hugo, because I did this film Hugo where we used the Alexa. And Ang said, the Alexa, the digital camera, is not really always meant to look like a film camera. So he said, let's detach ourselves from the past and look at the future of digital cinema and what is the potential of digital cinema with Billy Lynn. And we don't really know what we're getting ourselves into. So Billy Lynn, we just jumped in. We didn't know we were shooting 120 at the beginning. We thought maybe we'll shoot some scenes at 24, some scenes at 48 or 60. But what ended up happening is 120, from a workflow point of view, for a small team in a small lab, was simple, because 120, you could deliver deliverables from 120 mathematically. And also it gave Ang choice in post-production so that he could give you a scene at 24 or a scene at 60. So when you see Billy Lynn at 120, he is actually dropping down sometimes to 60 and sometimes to 2K to make you feel a little bit like the old movie feeling. So when you're shooting in 47 days 3D very quickly, you have to have a shorthand. You have to be able to speak very simply to be efficient. So we have a gear system. So Ang has a gear system 1 to 5, and I think of it like a little Italian race car. Gear 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's how we qualify our 3D immersiveness and impact, and we also qualified many sort of technical things like the 4K. So the full shebang, the 120 4K 3D, gear number 5, is our halftime show and our battle scene of Billy Lynn, which is the crescendo. And sometimes we had a character such as the girlfriend or the love interest. And that, for Ang, sometimes he would say, let's go to low gear, which for him was 2D, which to him was a character that was a fantasy character. So for him, the 120 3D full shebang was realism, and some characters were 2D fantasy, unrealistic characters. So he has a nice way of intellectualizing as we work on set where we're going to go with the 3D and where we're going to go with how we post-production work with the frame blending with those images. Everything was built in labs that ended up in his office. We had a quote from Deluxe and a quote from Technicolor to do the work on Billy Lynn, and we decided to do it ourselves in Ang's office, which was hard work. But all you have to do is build it in road cases and protect it and have really good air conditioning. And with really good air conditioning, the computers keep working and you can process that. Our negative was about 420 terabytes. We were shooting 7.5, maybe 10 terabytes a day, the maximum day being about 18 terabytes. There was no second unit. We had some fantastic 3D rigs from Stereotech. And Stereotech is a German company that is working a lot in China. And their 3D rigs, their mechanical engineer has built a frame that's really excellent. So I did not have to fix any shots in post-production or convert any shots. The rig itself held the heavy camera, and it was very, very well engineered and customized to suit our need, as you saw at the opening photos. So the big success for 3D, something I want to remind people, is it's not like 2D, and I'm sure in VR it's the same thing. It's all about prep and organization, and you have great success if you can test. And with Billy Lynn, we did 12 test days, and we were testing what it was like to have high vibrations and high frequencies at 120, and how to sort of plan all our travel experiences and turning around dailies every day very, very efficiently. So the prep, I can't overemphasize that you will make better quality 3D if you plan and storyboard. That's why I have a lot of storyboards that are going to come up. So that you don't have unexpected pitfalls. People will still say 3D shooting is slower, and they say that if they are not well planned. But if you are well planned, you can shoot 22 setups a day. You can shoot very fast with 2 rigs, and you can shoot on a 2D schedule, like Ridley Scott shoots on a 2D schedule, and have very, very successful experiences in principal photography. So I encourage the 3D filmmakers who are just starting with 3D to give themselves some time and to do some testing so that things are figured out before they go out onto set. Because if you only have 1 day or 2 days with a short film, you want to maximize all of that time. For the same reason, we, with the camera department, integrate 3D people with regular camera department. And we normally have myself and 2 engineers on set. So we're adding on set 3 people, basically, to any film, just to make sure the on-set capture goes smoothly. We use primes, normally master primes. We're trying to match the 2 eyes as carefully as possible. I don't like to use zooms. There have been many films that will use zooms, but I don't like to create extra work for visual effects, and matching the zooms has before been a problem. So I would prefer to shoot on prime lenses and commit to a lens size and leapfrog with rigs if that's necessary. So I encourage the master prime, having tested all prime lenses in the world, I think, pretty much. I encourage the master prime as the clearest and most consistent between the left and right eye. You can see that I make notes in post-production, and visual effects in this movie was definitely a challenge, and we had an in-house visual effects team called East Side Effects. We had a gentleman from The Hobbit who did some amazing work. We also had Mr. X, which did our entire football stadium and our backgrounds. And I will tell you, to be honest, on a film like this that's committed to 120 and 4K, we had to make some good judgment calls about what is 4K and what is 2K in our deliveries. And of course, we wanted to keep our foregrounds in 4K and preserve our photography in the foreground. And I will be honest that some of our set extensions are in 2K. And I think as we get closer in the future and prices come down, we might be able to have a film that's 100% a 4K visual effects delivery. Although this film is not that for all our visual effects work that had to happen in stereo. What we discovered with Billy Lynn, with 120, it's a very bright movie, is that you could see much further, you could see depth much further than we expected. And with Billy Lynn, it's here at 28-foot Lamberts at your theater, you can actually see the eyes of the extras. So 120 reveals the artifice of the cinema and filmmaking, so you must be careful. And this is where we try to go many steps forward from The Hobbit, where you could see the makeup and the artifice, and use a project like Billy Lynn that put us in a natural environment, like in Morocco in the sand. So the beauty of 120 is that it shows everything and it shows more. It shows in close-ups muscles and it sees through the skin. You're having so much more data, but you have to be careful because it's a very powerful tool. You can make somebody look very, very interesting, but you can also make somebody maybe look a little bit ugly. So in our business in Hollywood, we need to be careful with this powerful tool of 120 4K as we move into the future. We are saying that Billy Lynn is 40 times the visual data of a normal 2D experience. You have 4 times with the 4K, and you have 2 times with the 3D, and 120 is 5 times 24. So you're really having sometimes a sensory overload. There are people who've gone to the film who had a bit of anxiety because they're not used to being put in that position as a viewer. I do have quotes from Martin Scorsese and other filmmakers I've worked with because they gave me something that I could bring to Ang Lee. Having done Life of Pi, Ang Lee said, "This is my first step into 3D on Life of Pi," and he was unsure of 3D. But the process of Life of Pi and working at 24, Ang had to edit Life of Pi, the close-ups, out sometimes of the film because at 24 he couldn't look at the actor's eyes. So Ang realized in his first work in 3D that there was a problem, and it was a comfort problem, and it was an ability to lock in and look at somebody. And so he wanted to go to high frame rates. So when you look at the face, you have it, you can lock in on somebody's eyes, an actor's eyes, and stay there. And that's really, really important in communicating with the audience and having a true experience. So dramatic filmmaking at 3D, 120, Ang Lee does not want to work at lower than 120. So his next film he's planning at 120 frames as well. And I think he's just beginning to discover a lot of new things that you will see a lot of change in his next film. So he took a big step and he's demonstrated something to you in a very, very bold way. What I talk about when I say I brought something to Ang Lee from other directors like Martin Scorsese, I was trying to bring the history of 3D cinema, which is a long history, into the room. And in Hollywood, we currently have a bit of a problem with 3D filmmaking, which is having images coming out of the screen and not being a gimmick, right? And using the screen space. And I am always saying to people, I don't make fish tanks. I'm not in the fish tank business. I'm in the business of creating a dramatic experience where there is no screen, like this stage, where you have the front of the stage and the back of the stage. And the director should be using that. And that's what something Martin Scorsese understood from the old 3D movies of the 1950s, is the ability to work with 3D to connect with the audience and to bring things forward in a scene. So working with a really good director like Ang Lee, when you build a scene like we did with Steve Martin at the end of the movie, to me that's my favorite work, is to work on that stage. I feel like I'm in a New York theater with those actors and planning the camera positions from the wide shots to the medium shots to the close-ups. And how does that work with 3D? How does it work with 120? How are your eyes with the actor's eyes as he moves in front of you? And that's very, very powerful and very successful. And that's what we want to do in 3D, is work up to those moments and to build a connection. That's dramatic filmmaking. And that is something that Martin Scorsese said, push, Demetri, push. Let's go back to the classic, beautiful, big 3D space of like House of Wax. And I describe the 3D being like chocolate in House of Wax. It's so thick, the depth, you can cut it. So I am an instigator with 3D and with my directors to be bold. I was an instigator with Ang Lee. I said, have courage and be bold. And all of this technology, whether it's VR and 3D, these people we're working with, the one thing they have as artists is courage. And courage is extremely important when you're trying something new. Because once in a while, a cable doesn't work or a camera doesn't turn on, and people have to have patience and courage, and there will be a greater reward. So courage is a really big word for me, for artists, something I've seen and learned about from the artists that I've worked with. I should talk about the cinematographer's role. The cinematographer is, of course, somebody who has incredible responsibilities on a film set. So it is my job with the cinematographer and the director to say, 3D's okay, we'll be all right, we have this under control. The cinematographers are being asked to add more light. And of course, for 120, we needed a lot more light. But not just for 120, for 3D, You need light so you can shoot at a 5.6. You need a good T-stop on your lens. Any 3D project, without focus and depth of field and focus in the background, you lose the 3D stereo cues. Of course, it's like me here, everybody's in focus. And so the 3D is requiring a lot more lighting and a lot more understanding of where to put the lights, and especially around the 3D rig for the close-ups. The lighting for 3D can be complicated. What we thought with 120 3D is to separate ourselves from conventional 2D lighting. And that's another reason Ang Lee didn't like me talking about Hugo. He said, because you lit it like a cinematic movie on film, you had to have lights to separate the depth. But Ang Lee said, at 120, 4K 3D, you set up your cameras, you have depth. You just have it. 3D is giving that to you. Why do you need the backlight, the round light, the side light through the chair? It's already there. We are capturing in 3D. So let's pull away some of the overbaked and overdone conventions of 2D and go simply into Billy Lynn and not overcomplicate it and overbake it. You have to be really careful with 3D if you get nervous to do too many effects or too many things. And when you can sort of strip away the layers and just look at the 120 4K 3D, you start to understand the beauty that's there in a simple shot like a close-up. And it's worth just looking at those things and counting how many hairs are in somebody's eyebrow, or the little expressions in someone's eyes, because you can see so much more, and you can see the extra behind him smiling. So you have to be careful. The problem with 120 is the acting has to change, because if you see the actor thinking about his lines or looking down at his marks, he gives himself away. So again, it's showing the artifice of filmmaking and our craft, because it's a very powerful capture tool now that we're jumping into. So the performers and the direction has to change. And some subjects that are more naturalistic, I think, will be better, because we're trying to show the world in a different light. And I think 120 shows the world much closer to as we see it in daily life. So I think the DI process and the post-production process, dealing with massive amounts of data and footage and all this information we're now giving you to make all the versions of your film, is just the beginning of what can you do with this? What can you do with the 120 if you want to drop down and ramp scenes and go in your movie from 18 frames per second to 30 to 48, and through a scene like a 2D scene, but then when you get into that close-up, maybe you're at 120. So I think it is a storytelling tool, and I think it can be, James Cameron calls high frame rate a storytelling tool. So of course, it's a tool, you can use it within a project, but Ang Lee is calling it a format because he released his entire project in a bold statement as 120 4K. Didn't want to overcomplicate it too much. It's not just a little tool. He's saying, this is a new way to see, so let's start looking and let's start talking about that. So this film wouldn't be possible to see it in its way without laser projection. And I've been really lucky with laser projection, because in 2012, sorry if we missed anything, I didn't notice if that had changed. What I was going to say is, laser projection is a savior of 3D, and we have to thank Christy for testing Billy Lynn with us with 2 laser projectors at 28-foot Lamberts. It was never our intention to go that bright. We were trying to be 14, and that would have been the gold standard. But when we set them up, before we had calibrated the laser projectors, Ang looked at full bright 28, and he said, my God, that's amazing, let's keep it bright. And the cinematographer was like, wow, that's really bright. But he wanted to be bold and have you look at all those little details in the sand and the dust. What I wanted to say is the first laser projection I saw was Hugo in 2012 at IPC with a single laser projector. But this experience of seeing simultaneous 120, simultaneous is so comfortable. It's such a great 3D experience. And that, for both eyes, all of that information. It could almost be 240, because our friend Doug Trumbull shoots and shows 60 to you, alternating frames, not simultaneous, and he calls it effectively 120. And Doug Trumbull has been a really big inspiration. 60 has been an incredible step, but 120 in both eyes, effectively your brain is getting 240 frames per second. So you see how we can just keep stepping forward with that. So I have some, you'll see some clips from some other films coming up, and how we used smaller cameras and how we had relationships with Alexa, and Alexa being very, very different than the F65. And Ari's work with us was very, very important to get smaller cameras as well. And their color palette is different, and our grading for Billy Lynn was done on a base light, and it's the first DI ever done at 120 in 4K. We started in 2K because it was taking time to render as we were doing windows and as we were working on each shot. But Film Light really, really helped us on Billy Lynn, and they spent a week working and changing their base light system for us. So by the end of the DI, we were playing the entire movie in 4K, 120 dual projector in real time, right off the base light. So they've been really very, very helpful with us as well since Hugo grading these 3D movies. So I just wanted to say thank you to them. I wanted to talk a little bit about the artist, and he's providing aesthetics that are great for 2D and for 3D at the same time. So even though we are making a 3D movie, we're providing a 2D movie. And people said, what's it like to work with someone like Ang Lee? Because I'm there to help him make his 3D. It's not really my 3D. It has to be his 3D. It has to be his movie. And I think of someone like Ang as Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo. And I was thinking of Michelangelo because I was in the Sistine Chapel and I read the book, and it said Michelangelo had a note from the Pope, and he said, Michelangelo, you have to paint the Sistine Chapel or I'll put you in prison. And the Sistine Chapel is 2D, and it's one of the world's first graphic novels. But Michelangelo wrote back to the Pope and said, I don't want to work and paint, I want to be a sculptor. And to me, working in 3D is much like being a sculptor, because we have to think about the shape, the roundness, and everything around that sculpture. So I think that these debates and these issues go back a long time. It goes back a long time. But for us, working in a studio with a great director like Ang Lee is like working with a Leonardo da Vinci, where we're allowed to paint a little bit of the painting. So every artist feels like they're contributing a little bit to the aesthetics of that work. And I talk about Michelangelo because we are providing 2D out of one of those eyes at the same time as we're providing sculpture. So we're trying to get everything for all iPhones, laptops, and then for our big 3D cinema experience. This is a 14 menu slate, so it has a burst. So when I started working with James Cameron's company before Hugo, and they had a really wonderful, yes, thank you. I think the PowerPoint's a little slow. Okay, so 3D is not just about the rig and the cameras, but it's about the whole workflow that is attached to that. And that's what the success is. And so what I've done is I've moved on and used other suppliers. I did a movie with Reality Rigs, and this movie is our first movie with Stereotech out of Munich. And we're still working on this amazing workflow, but I will attribute a lot of my learning to after Avatar with James Cameron's company, understanding what software is required to align and to manage things on set and to have a stereo brain. So I do give a lot of credit to some of the learning that went into my work before Hugo that allowed me to get to the point where I am now. So because I'm going to just push through the PowerPoint photos from T.S. Spivet, which also played in China, thank you, and was graded in IMAX. These are the mini cameras and the very small Steadicam that shows 3D can be mobile and possible. These mirrors, the organic mirror is a very, very big important part of 3D immersion. So I'm constantly checking the mirror to keep it clean, so both lenses are seeing the same thing, because you have a degraded reflection on one eye. So I'm going to try and speed up the PowerPoint to get done in 3 minutes, and I'm just showing you sometimes I'm bringing things out of the screen really far, and we're working up to those moments. We can just... That is the Alexa M, okay? So that is... Now these storyboards, you can see where the storyboard artist is helping with the 3D to already tell you what is breaking frame and what's coming up. It's very important to me that storyboarding and is part of a good planning and a good prep process. This is only 24 pounds. 3D can be handheld. I do like to include that photo because everyone tells me you can't do 3D handheld. But if you try and you do it very carefully and elegantly, you won't make people sick. So, again, the storyboards are key to so much of the successful on-set shoot. I'm just going to go quickly just towards the end. I like to include some quotes from directors who I think should be working in 3D, and I'm hoping Kill Bill 3 is 3D. If anybody knows Quentin Tarantino, please send him a message. I'm interested. Another small rig. This is working in China right now with Florian Mayer, this small rig. And you can really just hold it in one hand and put it in the corner of a car. So the mobility systems for 3D are getting better. The thing is to get the cameras that can do 124K small. And that's a big challenge for the industry right now. So just wrapping up in 2 minutes. And I just wanted to say that I've directed a short film. It's a 4-minute film, and it's shot at 120 3D as well. And I'm doing dance like Peanut, and to show you the dust and movement. And I think at 120, human motion is what's really important. Okay? Thank you. Thanks for letting me speak today. I appreciate it.